Hi there, and welcome to the Explaining History YouTube channel. Thanks for tuning in. And if you're watching this, it means you're interested in writing an essay about, or you're doing an assignment on Stalin's labour camps, the Gulags. Okay, this is a very, very quick story of the development of the Gulags. The camps originally are revolutionary dumping grounds for class enemies and members of the Tsarist regime that are set up during the Russian Civil War and in its immediate aftermath. The camps originally begin in the Soboletsky Islands in the Arctic, and they're not designed really to have specifically an economic purpose. They develop that later on in the mid 1920s, not quite after Stalin's ascension to power by 1928, sort of about 1924-25. So yes, the camps are simply places to send class enemies to. Some of the camps initially, because there isn't any specific rhyme nor reason to them, treat their inmates reasonably well. The Soboletsky Islands are for the camps there are a former monastery, and the inmates get to have a reasonable existence. There were all sorts of ideas amongst the Bolsheviks initially that it would be quite easy and painless to reform, in inverted commas, class enemies, bourgeois types, and make good socialist citizens out of them. The camps, when there is during the mid Civil War period, when there begins to be kind of protest and discontent amongst them, suddenly become immensely more brutal. And it's one individual, one of a former inmate, who very quickly becomes a camp administrator and an administrator of an entire camp system, a guy called Naftali Frenkel, who points out that the camps could have an immense economic value to the Soviet Union. He is, so the story goes, taken to see Stalin in 1924, and he runs the numbers and explains to Stalin that the camps can actually be real money makers by simply having a large amounts of unpaid labour. And after 1924, you receive an explosion of camps, particularly east into Siberia, where you have camp systems such as Kolyma, which was it's intensely based around logging and mining, and in Kazakhstan, the Karaganda camp system. So the camps exist when you hear names like Karaganda and Kolyma. These aren't just individual camps, these are entire regions of camps. So instead of thinking about specific camp locations, think about the camps as being economic regions, vast economic regions of largely unpopulated parts of the Soviet Union. The development of the camp system goes hand in hand with the development in the sort of fashionability of exploration. In the mid 1920s, one of the great heroes of Soviet literature and Soviet film are explorers and aviators. In most of the places where camps were set up, prisoners who had a expertise in things like metallurgy and geology were originally sent on expeditions to conduct surveys of the regions to find out what was there. So poorly understood was the Soviet Union's own territory. And invariably they would find out that it was mineral rich and camps would develop. The big influx of population into the camp comes during the famine era and immediately afterwards, because the majority of inmates wind up as kulaks and former kulaks, people who have been through dekulakization, and the result, if we fast forward all the way through the camp history to 1953, when really they're dismantled, after Stalin dies, Beria who, despite being the monster that we know him to be, had a head for numbers and was aware that despite what Frankel had always argued, the camps were not money makers. Slave labour is immensely inefficient. It costs by and large more than it ever yields, and half-starved people don't do particularly good or effective work, and they are, unsurprisingly, not very motivated in their labour. The keeping the camps open was an economic non-starter, and it was a way of trying to create some kind of a break with Stalin, which was Beria's bid for power, had he not been arrested and executed by Khrushchev. Anyway, that's a brief nutshell of the camp system, and I'll try to return to this a little bit more, but hopefully that will give you a little bit of detail to put into essays when discussing the Soviet camps.